Hey, code noobs, Russell here. If you are brand new to coding, you've probably found yourself learning the basics of web development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you've gone through the basics, it's probably time to step your game up a little bit and learn a library and or framework. And one of the most common ones that you will find out there in terms of libraries is React. And that's probably why you found yourself on this video. If you're looking to learn React, this is a great place to start. We're actually going to go through some foundational understanding of React today. And before we get into it, I want to just briefly talk about React itself and what it is. React is a front-end library. And this is on the right here. I have the React documentation, which you can view at react.dev. And I'm not going to go actually through the documentation today, but I just want to show you that at this point in time, React actually recommends that you use a full stack framework now. And so React is a library, which means you can build beautiful UI with it, but it doesn't have the full functionality of a framework, which allows you to do both front-end code and back-end code all in one. And so what they actually do is they recommend using Next.js. And so you've probably heard of that before. If you're interested in React, you've probably heard of Next.js before. And so I want to show you just on their documentation. If you scroll down all the way here, they actually recommend to go full stack with a framework, and they recommend two, Next.js or Remix. Both of them are pretty popular. But today we're going to go through how you sort of take yourself from JavaScript, from understanding JavaScript, to learning the basics of React, and then walking that up to Next.js. So from here, I'm just going to click on Next.js, and this will take me over to Next.js.org. And this is the full React framework for the web, both front end and back end. Really, really cool framework, which is very powerful. And today we're going to actually walk through their actual learning tutorial. So I'm just going to learn from their homepage. Let me back up a sec. So from their homepage, you can just go learn Next.js. And they have a great Next.js tutorial, which I'm going to do in another playlist. But today, I want to walk through the React foundation. So if you don't have any experience in React, that's totally fine. We're going to walk through this together, and I'll explain everything as we go. But the documentation here is really great, and this project that we're going to build is a really great way for you to go from understanding JavaScript to stepping yourself into React. So this is chapter 1. What is React? And we're going to go through learning React Foundation. So if you want to follow along, just go to next.js.org, click that learn next, and then go down here to where it says React Foundations, learn React Foundations. And this is, as it says, new to React, learn how to go from JavaScript to React with this Foundations course. So with that, let's get right into it. And just so you know, this is broken up into chapters, so it's nice and piecemeal. You can digest it one piece at a time. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. We're always happy to answer those. Or if you haven't done so already, join us over on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/codenoobs. It's an amazing community of developers just like you who are just starting out, who are somewhere along their journey and looking to communicate and network with other developers. It is completely free. You can join and participate in the community. So again, just go over to facebook.com/groups/codenoobs and introduce yourself, say hello, and meet some awesome developers. So with that, let's get right into it. So React Foundations, to effectively learn Next.js, it helps to be familiar with JavaScript, React, and related web development concepts. But JavaScript and React are vast topics. How do you know when you're ready to start using Next.js? Well, that's what this is for. Welcome to the React Foundations course. This beginner-friendly, example-led course will guide you through the prerequisite knowledge for Next.js. You will build a simple project step-by-step, starting with a JavaScript application, then migrating to React and Next.js. So you really don't need to know anything but JavaScript at this point. And each section builds on the previous one, so you can choose where to start depending on what you already know. Now, prerequisite knowledge. This tutorial assumes that you have some knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and no knowledge of React. So you don't really need to know anything beyond HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're already familiar with React, you can skip to From React to Next.js chapter and take the dashboard app course, which is going to be in another playlist. But I'm assuming that you are brand new, and we'll just get right into it. So your system requirements. Before you start this course, make sure that you have the following installed: Node.js 20 or later. So if you have VS Code, I recommend using that as your IDE for this project. I created a new folder called React Foundations, and I'm working inside of that. If you want to check if you have Node installed, just do Node-V, and you can see I have 20.0.0, and that should work for this. We may need to update that, but I think that should be fine. So let's continue. So operating systems, Mac OS, Windows, or Linux, and VS Code or other text editor of your choice. If you do need to install Node.js, just head over to their website. You can Google Node.js and install that very easily and quickly. So get that done and then come back and join us. So yeah, with that, let's get ready. So now that you have been introduced to the course, let's dive in. Okay, so chapter 1, about Next.js and React. Learn what React and Next.js are and how they can help you build modern web applications. So let's start with chapter 1. Okay, Next.js is a flexible React framework that gives you the building blocks to create fast, full-stack web applications. But what exactly do we mean by this? Let's spend some time expanding on React and Next.js, what they are, and how they can help you build web applications. So building blocks of web applications. There are a few things you need to consider when building modern applications, such as the user interface, how users will consume and interact with your application. You can think about, the buttons, the components, the things that they interact with on the page. Routing, how users navigate between parts of your application. So what are the different pages that you have, and how do users get from one page to another page? Or just, in the sense of web applications, maybe we don't always consider them pages, but just the views that users have, right? Data fetching, so where your data lives and how to get it. So your data may live on a database. If we think about big e-commerce sites, right? We're not going to load all of an e-commerce site at once. We're actually going to piecewise load those pieces of information about each product, maybe depending upon what page you're viewing at the time. So we need to have that data stored somewhere and then also fetch that data. Rendering, when and where to render your static and dynamic content. So again, with like an e-commerce site, right? We don't always want to render everything on the client side, like in the browser. Sometimes you want to get some of that stuff and render it on the server side. And we'll talk about that more as we go into Next.js. Also, integration. So what third-party services you use for CMS, auth, payments, etc., and how you connect them. So again, like you can think about your content, right? Your content management system, your authentication. So how are we authenticating users? How are users paying, like Stripe? This can even go as far as using large language models, like integrating with the OpenAI API, right? So you can actually do, large language model requests right inside your application. Infrastructure, so where you deploy, store, and run your application code, whether that's serverless, CDN, Edge. So where are you hosting your website, basically? Performance, how do you optimize your application for end users? So making sure that everybody has a fast experience on your application. Scalability, so how your application adapts as your team, data, and traffic grow. So obviously, as you build up applications and those applications grow, we want to make sure that everything stays fast and seamless, and every user is having a great experience, even if you have one user or thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. And then finally, developer experience. So making sure your team's experience building and maintaining your application is spot on and enjoyable, right? You don't want to be struggling every time that you start to develop or continue working on your application. So for each part of your application, you will need to decide whether you will build a solution yourself or use other tools such as packages, libraries, and frameworks. So with that, what is React? React is a JavaScript library for building interactive user interfaces. By user interfaces, in other words, UI, you'll hear that one a lot. we mean the elements that users see and interact with on screen. So in this picture, you can see maybe there's a logo, maybe there's a nav bar, a sidebar, some blog posts, something like that. So these are all UI elements that we typically see on a website. And of course, React is going to be the library that we use to generate these pieces of your application and make them look beautiful, right? So by library, we mean React provides helpful functions, in other words, APIs, to build UI, but leaves it up to the developer where to use those functions in their application. Part of React's success is that this is relatively unopinionated about the other aspects of building applications. This has resulted in a flourishing ecosystem of third-party tools and solutions, including Next.js. It also means, however, that building a complete React application from the ground up requires some effort. Developers need to spend time configuring tools and reinventing solutions for common application requirements. So what does this mean by unopinionated? It means that React gives you a bunch of tools, but it doesn't really force you to use them in any specific way, which is great because it provides a lot of flexibility. However, in that, it also means that you typically have to build a lot of this functionality on your own. And we'll see what that means a little bit as we dig into Next.js, because Next.js sort of handles a lot of this for you. So here we go. What is Next.js? Next.js is a React framework. So notice there's a difference here between a library and a framework that gives you building blocks to create web applications. By framework, we mean Next.js handles the tooling and configuration needed for React and provides additional structure, features, and optimizations for your application. So here we have a picture of the basic understanding of sort of what Next.js adds to this magical soup of React, if you think about it that way. So we have, our browser here, and then we have this is everything on the client side. So everything that a user sees in their browser side, right? Everything that's running on their computer. And then we have the server, everything that's happening on somebody else's computer, your computer, whether that's your self-hosting or in a cloud provider like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whatever you choose to do, or whatever server-side services you have, right? And then you can see sort of how these other pieces fit in here. So in Next.js, we have the UI with React. So that basically, could be either client or server side, right? We have the rendering, which could be client side or server side. We have routing, which again could be client or server side, and data fetching. And there's other ones there. And then we have the ecosystem, which is your database, your CMS, your auth, and your e-commerce. And these things typically live on the server because we want to protect some of these. We don't want the user to have free access to things like our database, our CMS, our auth service, and maybe our e-commerce, like our payment service, right? We have to give them specific access to these based on their authorization, right? So you can use React to build your UI, then incrementally adopt Next.js features to solve common application requirements such as routing, data fetching, and caching, all while improving the developer and end user experience. Whether you are an individual developer or part of a larger team, you can use React and Next.js to build fully interactive, highly dynamic, and performant web applications. In the next chapters, we will discuss how you can get started with React and Next.js. So congratulations, you've completed chapter 1. Now that you've learned what React and Next.js are, next up, we will be looking at rendering UI interfaces, user interfaces, and learning the fundamentals of how UI, user interfaces, are rendered in the browser. All right, so click on the next video and we'll start from there.